Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, 3 things that must happen if the Timberwolves are going to surpass last year's win total, win 50-plus games this season. Of 3 very simple things, realistic things that could happen this year. It's all coming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Happy hump day. Hopefully you're having a fantastic week so far. Today, I want to give you 3 things that the Timberwolves need to do this season or that need to happen. Their individual skills for individual players. 3 things that must happen if the Timberwolves are going to turn in a season that surpasses last year's, at least in the regular season. I'm not going to tell you 3 things to win the finals because a lot of things have to go right. And it turns out if you win 50-plus games, you're in a position to get to the finals and win the finals, right? They won 49 last year, went to the conference finals 2 years ago. They could have been the 2 seed. They ended up, or they could have been the 1 seed. We're in the 1 seed position most of the year, ended up in the 3 seed and still got to the conference finals. So anything could happen once you get to the playoffs. But how can they focus on beating that? We'll call it even the FanDuel over-under win total, the 50.5 that we talked about a few weeks ago when that line was released, that win total was released. We're talking about like last year they won 49 games. The over-under's at 50.5. What can they do to surpass that this season? I'll give you 3 specific things. They're all realistic. They're all very possible. I'll break down why each of them is so important. So that's what we'll do today on the show. We'll hit a couple of notes at the end as well. A big thank you here off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. All right. So, quick context, of course, 2 years ago, the Wolves won 56 games. And then they trade Karl-Anthony Towns 2 days before the start of training camp. And crazy to think about, by the way, that we're still not even to 11 months from when that trade happened. Like, it was under 11 months ago when the Wolves made that trade. It feels like it was 14 years ago, but at the same time, it feels like Karl-Anthony Towns was on the Wolves for 14 years too. So anyway, they trade Karl-Anthony Towns at the end of the offseason, get back Julius, Randle, Dante DiVincenzo. They get through, relatively healthy the first few months of the season. You lose Dante for a month, Julius Randle for a month, Rudy for a few weeks, all kind of overlapping there in the January, February timeframe. It takes forever for the Wolves to figure things out, and then they end the season fairly strong and avoid the play-in in the 6th seed. What do the Wolves need to do this year to surpass last year's 49-win regular season total and get closer to that 56 wins from 2 years ago? Now, a couple things. One, I'm not picking the actual win total today. I didn't do that when I picked the over-under, when I went through the win total a few weeks ago. I did say that, and I believe now they'll hit the over. I do think they win at least 51 games this season. And a big piece of that is I think last year they had a lot of bad luck. You look at their overall, and this isn't one of my 3 things either, by the way. I just want to set the stage before I get into it. They had some bad luck, right? I mean, Minnesota had the point differential of, I think, a 55-win team, and they won 49 games. So they were better than their record. They had some bad luck in close games, and yes, there's an art to it. I'm not saying it's all bad luck. There's an art to winning close games. There's also an art to losing close games. The Wolves had that too. Remarkably, Anthony Edwards still was in the top 3 of clutch player of the year voting. He didn't shoot well in the final minutes of close games overall. I know he's had clutch defensive plays each of the last 2 years, the Indiana game 2 years ago, the OKC game last year, but offensively, those moments haven't always gone super well for Ant. Like, that's something he's got to learn. I think coaching, there's some blame to go around there for sure. All that to say, I thought the Wolves were better than a 49-win team in the regular season. I also think, given maybe slightly better health, which I think is reasonable to hope for, and maybe not reasonable to expect, but it's certainly on the table. And also, year 2 of Julius Randle playing with Rudy Gobert and Anthony Edwards. Remember, year 1 of Rudy Gobert with the Wolves ended in an 8 seed. Year 2 ended in 56 wins and a conference finals appearance. Last year was year one of Randle with Gobert and with Anthony Edwards, and this will be year 2. So further acclimation for Randle, and yes, also Dante DiVincenzo, and some better luck and perhaps a little better injury luck. I think that alone will help get them over 50 wins. Now, the other 3 things, player specific, that I want to talk about. Let's open by talking about, let's actually talk about Jaden McDaniels first. I want to hit 3 guys. We'll start with Jaden and a specific skill for each of these guys. With Jaden McDaniels, it's 3-point shooting. And it's funny when you look at his career, and I'm not going to get too in the weeds on anything before last year, but I do want to mention, as a rookie, he was league average 3-point shooter. 36.4% that season was basically league average. Dipped to under 32% the following year. And we saw the decision-making be a little bit better in year 2, Jaden, offensively, but the impact wasn't all that much better because the shooting was much worse. It was nearly 5 percentage points worse. Then year 3, the decision-making continued to improve. He made the leap defensively, went from just like a nice defender in theory to a really good defender, and he shot 40% from 3. That was the 8th seed season, the first year of Rudy Gobert. Jaden McDaniels shot 40% from 3, almost 52% from the field, and was awesome defensively. Then the 3 seed conference final season, Jaden shoots a shade under 34%. So he goes back down below league average. And I thought the decision-making was still good offensively, and he just continues to improve overall, or improve defensively, I should say. And then last year, we see him make a real leap. Overall, Jaden McDaniels made a small leap last year offense. I shouldn't even say small, a reasonably sized leap offensively. A career-high total rebound rate. By far a career-high offensive rebound rate. We talked about this a few weeks ago, that was a massive thing for Jaden. It made him a viable offensive threat because of the corner crashes, etc. And then defensively, even though he didn't make a all-defensive team, which is just nuts, or didn't make the all-defensive first team, Jaden actually didn't make an all-defensive team at all, which is nuts. He had a career-high steal rate and a higher block rate than he did the year prior when he was all-defensive second team. And then on the offensive side, a career-high rebound rate, which also career-high defensive rebound rate, career-high assist rate. But the 3-point shooting was down to 33%, the second lowest mark of his career. If Jaden McDaniels shoots, he doesn't need to shoot 40%. If he shoots 37%, basically league average, then he's actually a plus offensive player. Last year, I think he got to the point where you would say he wasn't a minus offensive player. And he's so good defensively that obviously makes him a super valuable player to the team. But prior to last season, the offense was so detrimental that it all kind of came out in the wash, and not really in a good way. The offense dragged down the impact he could have defensively, or the defense kind of buoyed the lack of positive offensive impact, however you want to look at it. Last season, the offensive rebounding was great. The decision-making, the passing was great. It was also career low turnover rate. The lack of foul trouble he was in, all those things were great. The last frontier for Jaden McDaniels is, can he be closer to a league average 3-point shooter? Through 5 seasons, he has 1 season at league average, 1 season above league average, and 3 below. What's the real Jaden? I think he's better than a 33% 3-point shooter. I do. I don't think he's going to shoot 40% again. But can he be somewhere in the 34 to 38, 39% in that, 34 to 38% is probably more realistic. Just a slightly better 3-point shooting season, and how big of an impact that would make to the Timberwolves offense. I should also point out, within that number, last year is by far his worst corner 3-point shooting percentage. More than half of his 3-point attempts last season, and nearly half for his career, come from the corners. And he was 33.5% for the corners at 3, which is a really bad corner 3-point number. He had never been below 36%, and he'd broken 40% twice in his career. So just a slight uptick shooting in the corners, and hopefully he spent all offseason just draining corner threes. That's going to make a massive difference. And the counting stats all trending in the right direction. He stayed on the floor more because of less fouls. He played, almost 3 more minutes per game because of that. And he played in every single regular season game, or every single game period, 82 games in the regular season. Career high points per game, career high rebounds per game, career high assists per game, career high steals per game. It all trended upwards with the increase in minutes. If he could just shoot a little better, outside the arc and specifically from the corners do wonders for Wolves offense that finally was a top 10 unit last year after being 17th the year before, and make a huge difference for him. He could go from averaging 12 a game to 14, maybe 15 a game, be in the conversation for an all-star appearance, which would sound crazy a year ago. But that's how good he was overall last season. He's just got to shoot the three a little better and maintain some of those other incremental improvements he's made over the last couple of seasons. All right, I want to talk next about Rudy Gobert, and then later in the show, TJ Shannon. I have a TJ Shannon note that I think is super important to the Wolves being a 50-plus win team this season. It's all coming next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors at Monarch Money. Most people cannot name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. And that is why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. There are plenty of categories that can really throw you off. Maybe you don't know you're spending. Subscriptions are a big one for people, things you don't realize you're not using, subscriptions that you haven't, streaming services you haven't used in a while. For me, it's food delivery, food overall, just spending more than I should there. You don't really realize it, so you see it all in one spot, and Monarch Money does exactly that. Instead of using multiple apps, you can see everything in one place. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNBA. All right, so we talked about Jaden's three-point shooting. Let's talk Rudy Gobert. I want to be careful with this because, and I've talked about this, about Rudy, this kind of Rudy narrative stuff is an overarching theme quite a bit on the show in the past. Rudy gets a really unfair rap nationally, and I'm not even going to justify the Shaq stuff with anything more than just mentioning Shaq's name. But I mean, beyond that, like just overall nationally, he gets a bad rap, and it's people are unfair to a guy who's a shoe-in Hall of Famer and deserves to be a shoe-in Hall of Famer. The impact he's had, and I also don't want to do the whole, like, we're not going to do Rudy's career right now, but let's just say he's been on one team that wasn't a top 10 defensive unit. There's a reason for that. No, he hasn't won a title. He's been to 2 conference finals. He's been in the second round multiple times past that. Like, there's a lot of guys that haven't done these things, and he's been one of the best 3 players in every one of those teams. That matters. Specifically, though, last season, we did see some signs of, I don't want to use the decline word, but I'm going to use the decline word because he was 32 last year. Is that what we saw? And he just turned 33 this summer. I don't know if it's actual decline or if it was, some other combination of factors. Acclimated with Julius Randle. He was relatively healthy other than the midseason stuff. I guess he missed 10 games with the injury that I mentioned earlier. But no matter how you slice it, the rebound rate was a career worst last season for Rudy Gobert. There's no denying that. The block rate was the second worst of his career. The only season that was worse was his first season in Minnesota. The overall defensive impact, if you look at most defensive metrics, was down for Rudy Gobert last year. He still made all defensive second team. He was still on the, I think he finished 13th in defensive player of the year voting a year after winning it. But I think the eye test would tell you as well, he was a half step slow in the perimeter, half step slow help side blocking shots in the paint. And perhaps it was a blip on the radar. Perhaps it was coming off a conference finals deep playoff run the year before. Now Rudy's not playing for France this summer, which is, selfishly great for the Timberwolves. And I was selfishly happy that he wasn't playing because he needs the time off. And Rudy's always in impeccable shape. I'm not at all saying he wasn't in shape. But remember, first year in Minnesota was coming off of playing Eurobasket for France. And he had some, I think it was like a core injury or something that was messing with him. And he's had knee stuff the last couple of years, foot stuff, which obviously gets scarier and scarier the older and the bigger you are as a player. And Rudy's always in great shape. So I'm not at all suggesting that. It's just he's getting older. That's the reality of it. But even like that, he's allowed to show some slippage defensively. I think that's the first place you'd see it is if the rotations are just a hair slow. Still an impact, still racking up never minds for guys that start to head to the paint and they go, oh, nope, Rudy's there. I'm backing back out. I'm going to drop it off to somebody else, whatever. But where it showed up unexpectedly and what needs to change this year is on the glass. That is first and foremost my concern when it comes to Rudy Gobert. Now, the Timberwolves as a team were a far better rebounding team than they were a year prior. So, there's an argument to be made that part of the reason that Rudy rebounded a little bit less was they had more guys committed to rebounding. Rudy was pulled away from the glass a little bit more often, pulled away from the paint more often on the defensive end because of the schemes Wolves were playing. They switched a lot more last year than they did previously. And, overall, Rudy was letting drop a little bit less than he had previously. Of course, if you're playing in drop, you're almost by definition in the paint or at least below the free throw line extended, and you're in a better rebounding position and secondarily, perhaps a better position to block more shots. I will concede that that's baked into the lower rebound rate and the lower block rate. However, we're talking a drop that is 3.3 percentage points. And again, the lowest of his career. I don't think it's only scheme. I think it was also just a lack of activity on the defensive glass and how often we see Rudy just decide to tap a rebound instead of grab it. And certainly on the offensive glass, back taps have been a big part of Rudy's game, and they've been helpful. They've also led to fast breaks the other way for the opponent. But I do think when it's all said and done, back taps on the offensive glass are a helpful thing for Rudy to contribute. But how often did you watch a Wolves game and just yell at your TV, grab the ball with two hands, Rudy? You're the biggest guy out there. Grab the ball with two hands. That sort of thing, I don't know if it's a focus thing. I don't think it's truly an effort thing, although like almost every player has had games and possessions where the effort isn't all the way there. Certainly the case with Anthony Edwards off the ball defensively. We talked about that just the other day. So I think we can call it like we see it. And in this case, it's the dedicated all the time effort wasn't always there from Rudy last year defensively. It doesn't change the fact he had a really good defensive year. The Wolves are really good. Rudy's going to be a Hall of Famer. He's still really, really good. But for the Wolves to be a 50-plus win team next year and for them to maintain and improve perhaps what they did on the glass as a team last season, Rudy Gobert has to be a big part of that. And yes, it helps to have better rebounding guards. It helps to have a more dedicated effort. The Wolves end up playing Rob Dillingham instead of Nickeil Alexander-Walker this year. And we'll talk about TJ Shannon next segment. And, there's, it's not quite that clean, but if in a world in which Rob Dillingham wins that rotation spot, which it's feasible, it's on the table, dude's not going to rebound as well as Nickeil. And Nickeil wasn't a great rebounder, but I don't think Rob Dillingham's rebounded as well as Alexander Walker did. So you got to pick that slack up somewhere else. And yes, Mike Conley's a better rebounder than every other point guard the Wolves have had over the last several years, especially a guy like D'Lo and, no question. But, and Dante's a pretty good rebounder too, pound for pound, but you need team rebounding, but Rudy's got to be kind of the epicenter of that defensive rebound effort. And it just wasn't there to the level that I think it's fair to expect of Rudy Gobert last season. Again, we'll see a little defensive slippage. I would expect to see it again this year. Hopefully there's not more. Hopefully it's where it was last year. And it's a stair step every couple of years where you see another quarter and a half step of I guess slippage for Rudy Gobert defensively. Hopefully it's not an every year thing because that could accelerate rapidly, but Rudy might only have 2 or 3 years left in Minnesota anyway. So hopefully that gets delayed another year, at least for that next stair step down. We just got to see a little more success on the glass. And then also along with that, the rim protection. You'd love to see that block rate higher than 4.1%. Again, the second lowest of his career. Both of those two worst years block rate wise for Rudy have come in Minnesota. All right. I want to close by talking TJ Shannon and a skill that TJ Shannon has to improve and bring to the table in 2025-26, assuming he is part of the Timberwolves rotation. And a couple quick Wolves notes here at the very end of the show. We'll do all that here next to close it out. All right, TJ Shannon. So the Timberwolves rotation, to be clear, there's 7 guys that we know are in the rotation. The 5 starters from last year, Reid, Dante DiVincenzo. The 8th spot was Nickeil Alexander-Walker's spot. There was never a regular ninth rotation spot available. And when a ninth guy played, it was kind of, Josh Minot, then it was Rob Dillingham, it was Jalen Clark, it was TJ Shannon, it was several, Joe Ingles. I guess Joe Ingles was, very early in the season. So a variety of guys had that spot. So if we assume that 8th spot becomes an 8/9 and you get a couple of guys that are auditioning for that 8th spot, but maybe ultimately you got a guy playing 10 minutes in the 8th spot and a guy playing 10 minutes in the 9th rotation spot, very likely it's TJ Shannon and one of Rob Dillingham or Jalen Clark. Let's assume that TJ Shannon is the inside track on a rotation spot. And this is also a little bit of a prediction and a projection for me, is that TJ Shannon will earn enough minutes to make an impact this year. My thing for TJ is the defense. I talked the other day, I can't remember if it was Friday's show or Monday's show, about, I think it was Monday. I don't know. It might have been middle last week. Doesn't matter. Recently, about how TJ Shannon offensively should be able to be an improvement over Nickeil Alexander-Walker enough that it will cover up anything that they lose on the defensive end from Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And I believe that to be true. I do think it'll be close to a wash. The impact will just come through TJ Shannon improves your offense and the defense, gets worse, I guess. Regresses, maybe, I guess, is a concise way to say it, with no Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I do think that's very possible. However, I also think TJ Shannon has the skills and ability to be good defensively, maybe even a plus defender. We know he's got an NBA body. I said that when the Wolves drafted him a little over a year ago. But can he apply himself, the NBA body and the NBA athleticism? Can the technique improve a little? I think he just doesn't look super comfortable defensively. Can the effort stay where it needs to be? I think he's a better defender than he was at Illinois, because I think he was being asked to do everything offensively. I know he was being asked to do everything offensively with the Illini. And so the defense, he just was out of gas. That shouldn't be the case. Now, in the NBA for him, at the same time, he plays at a breakneck speed. That's his whole thing. Go ahead and we'll dig into this on a future show, but TJ Shannon offensively this year was at the rim all the time. You look at on cleaning the glass, the percentage of shots at the rim. TJ Shannon was third on the Wolves in percentage of his shot attempts at the rim. Who are the top two? Well, Rudy Gobert, obviously, 86% of his shot attempts were at the rim, 98th percentile league wide. Josh Minot's the other one, putbacks, dunks, lobs. Number 3 is TJ Shannon. 46% of TJ's shot attempts last season were at the rim, 91st percentile, and only a quarter of his shot attempts were three-point shots. I knew it was going to be a high number. It surprised me that was such a big gap. And he basically didn't shoot anything from the mid-range. He had a couple, he had hit some floaters from the, deep paint, 10, 12, not deep paint, shallow paint, I guess, closer to the free throw line. But it was mostly stuff at the rim and then corner threes and the occasional pull-up three in transition. And those rim attempts are mostly in transition. He's a terror in transition. And coming out of Illinois, I wasn't convinced there was a whole lot of half-court scoring in TJ Shannon yet. He did a little bit more of that than I would have expected last year, but still so much of that was in transition. TJ Shannon is going to improve the Wolves offense just by virtue of getting to the rim as often as he does. Where he needs to show consistency and true improvement is on the defensive end of the floor, so they can trust him to be on the floor so he doesn't have to be on the floor with Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards, right? He can be on the floor with one of those guys, and you give TJ a tough assignment with Ant. And, then maybe Dante can be on the floor. Between the three of them, you can figure it out. You don't have to have Jaden on the floor at the same time. Or maybe I think TJ will score enough. He might be able to help carry an offense. TJ Shannon, Mike Conley, Jaden McDaniels on the floor together. TJ then has to take the second best perimeter player on the other side of the floor, on the defensive end of the floor. So he's got to be able to show Nickeil is a heck of a defender. Can TJ Shannon be 70% of what Nickeil Alexander-Walker is defensively? Can he be 120% of what he is offensively or whatever? I think that's truly on the table. But for that to be the case, TJ Shannon has to prove that he can do it on the defensive end. And that's where I'm going to be looking when it comes to TJ Shannon this season. All right, let's close with a couple of quick notes. First, this is kind of silly, and I don't think I'm going to dig into this anymore, but ESPN posted an article, the stat that could swing every NBA team's season, okay? The Wolves one, I'm just saying this because it's out there. The Wolves one is the number is 21. Well, what's 21? Has nothing to do with the Wolves. The number 21 is the past 21 NBA champions have had a current or recent first team All NBA honoree. I don't know what the parameters for recent are. Every title winner since the 04 Pistons has needed a top 5 player, meaning a first team All NBA player, to lead the way to the promised land. I'm reading this is Zach Cram at ESPN. Edwards isn't quite there yet. And then it talks about how he made second team All NBA last 2 years, and finished 6th in voting this year. So he was the 6th. If you look at the All NBA voting, obviously 5 on first team, he was 6th. He was next up. So all this is saying is, hey, if they're going to win a title, Ant's got to move from the 6th best player to the top 5. I think that's entirely feasible. And it's a bit of a cause and effect situation here, right? Like, if the Wolves win 55 games and get a top 3 seed and Ant keeps getting better, is he going to be first team All NBA? Yeah. Does that mean they're going to the title? No. If they win the title, does it mean he was first team All NBA? Probably, yeah. But I mean, it could have happened last year when he was like, it would have been close. I guess the point here is you don't win the title if you don't have a guy that has won first team All NBA. Ant hasn't done it yet. Obviously, Julius Randle, Rudy Gobert have not either. Julius was third team All NBA once. I don't think Rudy's been on an All NBA team. Anyway, I thought that was kind of silly. Does there need to be an Ant leap? Yeah, I think so. Leap is also a strong word. I mean, we talked about this the other day. Ant clearly got better last year. It's a conversation for another show, but decision making, yeah. Suppressing the turnovers a little, yes. Instead of taking a couple of mid-range shots a game, could he just take one of those and make it that attempt be at the rim and get to the line more often? Yes. But I think incremental improvement at this point, dude's going to be a top 5 player. Like, he just is. The defensive, I would actually argue that the being involved off the ball defensively is just as big of a deal as any of the other stuff for Anthony Edwards. We know he can shut down on ball with the big matchups when he's ready to go prime time, and probably, being on national TV 28 times this year isn't going to hurt that. Ant's going to want to lock in on national TV in big matchups, I think, more frequently than the alternative. So that's great. But I think it's that just as much as anything else. The last Wolves note I have is that Jesse Edwards was officially waived. Remember, Jesse Edwards was on a 2-way deal last year, signed a 2-way deal again this offseason, was on the Summer League team. And I actually was coming around by the end of Summer League with him as a possible, actual 5th big on the roster, the defensive version of Luka Garza, in the sense that what the floor is defensively. He doesn't have great hands. You're not going to get anything offensively, but he can defend. Instead, he went and signed in Australia, and I think the Wolves are fine with that. The Wolves ended up bringing in Enrique Freeman, who has been announced as a 2-way deal. The Wolves have not yet announced Tristan Newton, who was on a 2-way deal last year with Minnesota after they claimed him on waivers from the Pacers in December. But the expectation is that Tristan Newton will sign that final 2-way deal. So the Wolves 2-way deal guys will be Enrique Freeman, who was also with the Pacers last year. Tristan Newton and Rocco Zakarsky, this year's second-round pick, is on a 2-year 2-way deal. So Jesse Edwards officially has moved on. It was a formality. We knew he was going to play in Australia, but the Wolves did officially waive him on, I believe, on Monday of this week. Okay, that's all I got for you today. We'll be back on Friday. Reminder, programming note, in August, we're doing at least 3 shows a week, 3 to 4. We did do 4 1 week this month. So we'll keep you posted on the schedule for next week, but I will be back on Friday this week. And, we're less than a month away now from things getting real. And we're close to a month away from the anniversary of the cat trade. So that's the time of year it is. Anything could happen, right? So lots still to talk about here this offseason. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder that for your second listen, you can go check out the Locked On NBA show. Our guys, Doug, Matt, and Hayes, do a fantastic job. They'll keep you plugged in all offseason long, help you be the most informed NBA fan possible. You can find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Of course, so is this show, also part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.